Okay, definitely ready?
Yes.
All right, let's do this. Zoe Franklin, hello.
Hello.
How are we doing?
I'm very well today, thank you.
Nice to have you here in the summer still, whilst it's still relatively quiet. Although we've just been saying how the diary is a bit of a challenge now that you're becoming an elected member of Parliament.
Yep.
How much sleep are you getting at the moment?
Pretty good, actually, during the recess. Less so when I was in Westminster just before.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think just the long days, particularly on a Monday when you can vote till about 10 o'clock at night and then you're back in the morning first thing. So I commute from my constituency, which is Guildford.
Yep.
Yeah.
What would you say when you first were elected and just before the recess? How long was it? How many weeks was that?
2-ish.
So 2 weeks. What would you say your average hours of sleep per night were?
About 6.
Oh, Sid, that's
which
actually
for
a
me
lot.
is bad, but I know a lot of people quite happily function on 6. I'm not that kind of girl.
Are you normally sort of 8 hours?
I'm an 8-hour person.
Excellent. Right. Well, let's get into it then. Let's start right at the beginning and work up to now.
Yep.
So give us a short timeline of your journey getting to where you are now as an elected member of Parliament.
So I wasn't interested in politics in any way until I was about 26. And I was then working in a basement in London in publishing, and I decided that, well, I had a bit of a quarter-life crisis, as I talk about it, where basically I decided I kind of liked my job, but at the same time I wasn't having a huge amount of interaction with people, and I felt like I wanted to change the world. And yeah, that kind of drew me into politics. Alongside, my husband was quite involved with the Lib Dems, was thinking of standing in the council elections. And I thought, well, the good thing to do is to join the Lib Dems. I always voted for them, support my husband. He never stood. I then ended up standing in 2008 in a by-election to be a ward councillor in Guildford Borough. And kind of from there, in a sense, the rest is history. And I became a parliamentary candidate in 2016, shortly after the Brexit referendum, where I think all of us who kind of were looking at politics realised there had to be a general election after that. And I sort of thought, you know what? I don't want to watch someone else do the role of Lib Dem parliamentary candidate. I feel like I've got something to bring to the table. I love helping my residents when I was a councillor. And yeah, I became the candidate for Guildford. So I've stood 3 times, third time lucky, won Guildford this time with an 8,000 majority.
It's quite, so you were a prospective parliamentary candidate for quite a long time. Is that unusually long time, if you talk to fellow peers in the Commons?
There's a real mix. There are some for whom it's a relatively short period of time. There are some of us who have fought multiple elections. Certainly there's a good number of us who have done sort of 3-4 elections.
Wow. God, that must take it. If you were to sum up the 3 that you campaigned at, you stood for, how would you describe? So number 1 was what?
2017.
How would you describe that? Give me a line on that.
A shock to the system. It was my first thing of being a candidate in an election, and there was the off chance that long shot I could win. 2019, it was really intense and amazing. Again, it was a closer opportunity to win, but we didn't quite get there, 3,000 votes short. And then this one, there was a real sense of this is potentially the time. And if we don't win now in Guildford, it probably isn't going to happen for me. So yeah, it was amazing to.
Had you put in your head a three attempt cap?
Yeah, so I had said to myself and many others that if I didn't win this election, that I would not stand again, because I didn't feel that if I couldn't win this time, I clearly wasn't the right candidate. It wasn't the right time, and it was someone else's opportunity. But I win, and I'm hoping, I'm looking to stand again when we finally get to the end of everything. But yeah, just enjoying what I can do for my residents in Westminster.
Excellent. So you say 26 was the magic number where you started to get into Lib Dem politics.
Yeah.
But you grew up in Farnham, and you said before your family was not political.
Yeah.
But your parents were Conservative voters through and through.
Yep.
So there was clearly politics around the dining room table to some extent. And obviously, was there any tension when you realised that actually you were not going to be following your parents' footsteps and be a Conservative?
There's always been some robust discussions around the dinner table. We've always kind of, as a family, occasionally had the conversations. I'm 8 years older than my youngest, my brother. So for much of my time, I had a lot of adult company. So I was involved in a lot of conversations. But at the same time, we kind of leave it. We can have that discussion and then walk away and all be friends still.
What was the point then during growing up? Did you realise that what you were hearing from your parents in terms of what they believed and how they saw the world and what the country needed to do didn't align with what you were thinking?
So it's probably the first time that I had the opportunity to vote in a general election, and I can't remember which year that was, but I distinctly remember it thinking, well, I can't vote Conservative because I don't agree with what my parents' views on certain topics are.
Was there any specific topics?
I think for me, a lot of my politics is rooted in what I describe as social justice.
Yeah.
And I had some real issues with what the Conservative government was doing back around the time I was sort of 17, 18. My brain can't remember what year that would be, but it's a while back now. And I just thought I can't in good conscience do that. So this is something you may well hear from many involved in politics, particularly people who became MPs. I did the slightly strange thing as I went away and I read what's called the preamble to the Constitution of the Liberal Democrats. And basically it sets out the values of the party rather than the policies. And all policies are rooted in that values statement. But I read it and thought, yes, that really sits well with where I'm at in terms of my views on social justice, my views on equality.
Did you do the same for all other parties? Was it a wide-reaching sort of Zoe needs to read everything and come up with a decision, or
to be
were
honest,
you naturally
no.
attracted to Lib Dems?
So I knew that I wasn't a Conservative,
Right.
And because I lived in Farnham in Surrey, the Labour Party really weren't an option when it came to voting. And I've obviously since looked at kind of Labour and what they stand for. And there are bits where we clearly share values. But for me, it has been the Lib Dems. Once I read that value statement, once I started voting Lib Dem, I've always voted Lib Dem. And then I've also seen the way that in Guildford, when I started to kind of think about maybe I should get involved more, I looked around me and the Lib Dems who were working as councillors, who were supporting the MP Sue Doughty, they all had this very community-driven, very community-focused politics, which was really about helping people to get the best start in life, to have a fairer society. And that really sat well with me and kind of sat with where my values lie. The bit of politics I remember from my youth is the whole Blair period, that excitement. I'm a child of remembering the kind of the Blur Oasis stuff and I had a lot of friends who naturally went Labour when their parents were Conservative. But for me, there was always something missing. It just felt too polar opposite for me back then when I looked at the Conservatives and Labour, and finding the Lib Dems was this kind of combination of it was much more middle, much more centrist.
Okay.
And that for me felt right, but it also had the social justice values that I was looking for.
Do you remember what it was about the preamble to the Constitution of the Liberal Democrats? So for anyone who's just listening or watching who doesn't understand this, it's essentially, as Zoe said, an explanation of the values of the Lib Dems in general terms before going into a constitution, which is the set of rules that govern a political party. So that's what it was. I don't know why you would decide that was the text that you should look
I have
at
no idea.
as a
It just
teenager.
appeared.
What was it particularly in there which where the light bulb went off and it's like, this is the party that I'm going to go for?
Yeah, so there's a bit in it which talks about how regardless of gender, ethnicity, faith, all of those aspects of who you are, regardless of those, there should be equality, and there should be equality of opportunity and rights. And for me, it was yes, that's the light bulb moment. They clearly share my value of what I think the world should look like.
So what I'm sensing here is even though you got into politics at 26, you were politically engaged before then. To the extent you were reading the preamble to a constitution of a political party in your late teenagehood.
I don't think of it like that, because I certainly never gave political activism a second thought. I didn't do anything.
Why though? Why, if you read the Constitution to the Liberal Democrat Party and you thought this is what I believe in, why didn't you then at that point get involved? What was holding you back?
I don't know. I just wasn't interested. I was busy doing my A-levels. I have a very arts-leaning background, and I was busy singing in choirs, playing music, doing art. And I just thought, well, if you do politics, you're a bit weird. And here I am. I'm a bit weird.
And so let's talk about your what you went on to then. You've got 2 degrees. You've got a Bachelor of Music from the University of Surrey, and you've got a Master of Musicology, which Sounds incredible. What does musicology mean? Is that like the study of music in all forms?
Yeah, so it's kind of the theoretical study of music. So I, at Southampton University, did my master's thesis on sort of Baroque period music. But I also then had the opportunity to do some smaller projects, and I focused on at the time, there was the whole metrosexuality conversation around music with people like Franz Ferdinand, the Killers, and I wrote a long essay on that. I also explored how it sounds very highbrow, but the literary concept of anxiety of influence could be applied to music. And actually, if you do a cover version of something, how does it feel to be doing that? What kind of anxiety do you bring to the table when you try and do a cover of an amazing original track?
My goodness, that's incredibly intellectual. I don't think I could keep up with that as you were saying it. So what type of music are you then into?
So right now I just love Taylor Swift.
Are you a Swiftie?
Yeah, I am.
A master's in musicology and a Swiftie.
She's a brilliant writer, lyrics, but also musically. I think she's brilliant. And I think I also really like her because she has that incredible ownership of who she is. And she's just a great businessman as well as musician. But as well as her, I just like listening to whatever kind of comes on the radio.
What radio station are you listening to?
Radio 1.
Radio 1?
I do listen to Radio 1.
Interesting. Religiously? Or
whenever I'm in the car,
okay.
It's Radio 1. And I have two sons, 13 and 16.
Okay.
And so for me, I like Radio 1, but also I want to kind of listen to what they're listening to kind of have that conversation at the dinner table about what you're listening to and know what they're talking about.
You obviously, I'm assuming, play a musical instrument or many musical instruments.
I do.
What instruments do you play?
So I'm a singer first and foremost, and then I also play the whole family of recorders. Yes, and
what does
people instantly
mean?
go to terrible versions of London's Burning on the recorder, but actually recorders are a serious Baroque and modern instrument now, and just the repertoire, the range of stuff you can play is amazing. I don't get to play as much as I used to.
So, in the Commons or in Parliament, I think there's a parliamentary choir.
There is.
I think there probably are bands as well. Are you going to bring your recorders to the party? Is it recorders and vocals?
And I can play the guitar.
And you can play the guitar pretty well?
Reasonably well. I'm not going to do any lead guitar solos anytime, but I'm a good kind of rhythm guitarist.
Give it a few years, you'll be called up. Now people know.
Well, you never know.
Okay, so let's go to your first political activity. Always voted?
Yes.
Like as in every time? 100%?
100%.
Attendance?
Yes.
Do you remember what it was that pushed you into getting into then active politics? So publishing, which is what you're working in, wasn't saving the world enough.
No.
So talk to us about that, where you were then.
Yeah, so I was living on Belfields in Guildford, which is a lower income area of Guildford. Everyone has this kind of picture of Guildford as a really affluent, wonderful place. And it's a wonderful place, but it isn't universally affluent. So I was living on the former council estate, and I kind of looked around me and I just got cross and frustrated about my neighbours being let down by the council. And that was everything ranging from potholes to bin collections, to the fact that I knew there were people around the corner from me who couldn't pay their bills and had minimal furniture and were struggling. And I was encouraged to stand for, so I started off in the classic political activist way of delivering leaflets. That's the gateway.
And you got into this through your husband primarily. The main reason, the pull that got you into politics was your husband.
Yeah, indeed.
Who was obviously very politically engaged himself with the Lib Dems.
He is.
You didn't meet at a Lib Dem event or anything?
No, we were together before,
coincidental.
and then I knew he was a Lib Dem then, and we just kind of went to conference once. I didn't really do much at conference other than join the drinks and the meals, and just kind of gradually said, oh, well, I can deliver some leaflets, because I just had I was off work. I think I was still at work at that point, but we were planning to start a family, and I had some time available to deliver leaflets. Lib Dems got elected in the ward I lived in, and then one of them needed to move away and stand down. So I got approached by the former MP, Sue Doughty, and she said, Zoe, I know you're really involved with a residents' association. You helped plan a fun day on the green. Well, you could do even more if you stood and were a councillor. I initially said no. And then she kind of
Why?
I think there was an element of, I didn't think that I could do it in a kind of, not I didn't have the time, but more that it just felt so alien. How could someone like me do politics? And she came back and said, but Zoe, you're already doing so much of what you would do as a councillor. But
because you were doing so much community work.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you could do even more, and you could potentially bring more change, more positive change for the community. So I then said yes. We had a by-election, and I won that by-election.
How long did it take you to go from the no to the yes? What was the time period, and what got you from that one side of that answer to another? So
it must have been a fairly short time. I can't remember how long, because I think she must have asked me early summer, and then we had the by-election in September, just before conference. And I think it was just, I went away and thought about it, and I just thought, if I'm not going to, who is going to? Because there wasn't a kind of an obvious alternative to me. And it was likely that if we did find an alternative, they probably wouldn't be living in the community. And so I kind of just turned around and went, actually, I will do it. What's the worst that can happen?
Because your husband, as you mentioned, was the reason you got into politics. He was considering standing as an MP?
No, standing as a councillor.
He didn't decide to do it, so there must have been he must have gone through the process and actually ended up as a no.
Yeah.
Which you might, I assume, would have been part of, at least in some way, those discussions. So it's interesting then that you, going through that same process of working it out, then went for yes.
Yeah.
Did that inform in any way, or?
So his no was partly we were about to start a family. He, I'm pretty sure he was a civil servant at the time,
right.
And it just he just said, I mean, he talks about it now, that he just didn't feel it was the right time and he wasn't really sure about it. Whereas by that point, I was on maternity leave with our first child, and I love and adore my kids, but I am not a natural, I didn't have a job to go back to when I had the boys, and so I'm not a natural stay-at-home mum, so I wanted something else alongside being mum. And it just it made sense. It felt right.
In your election statement, I thought it was a really interesting line that you gave, where you said, we have so many councillors across the country who are not Liberal Democrats, who are not doing what they should be doing, which is serve their community. What did you mean by that?
So my experience has been that many people go into politics for what I think are the right reasons, which is they care about their communities and they want to serve their residents. There are still some people who perhaps don't go into it for that reason. It's a little bit more about the status that perhaps they feel that being a councillor brings them. And I don't think that then delivers good results for residents, because if your starting point is yourself or delivering value for money, that's not putting people first. And politics should always put people first.
How common do you think that people like that are in local government as councillors?
I've actually seen it less and less since 2019. And I think that has been... I think the whole COVID situation made people re-look at their lives, but in terms of what they were perhaps doing outside of work. I think people became a lot more aware of their communities and the people in them who were struggling. And I've seen that when I've been out knocking on doors and talking to people who perhaps live in big houses, who you might think that they're not very well connected with what's going on across the other side of town in areas that are less affluent. But actually, I'll always remember one conversation where I met this guy. He was clearly very comfortable in his life. And he said to me, I'm doing fine. I can help my children. That's not a problem. If they're struggling, I will help them. He said, but I really worry about, the people living over the other side of town who perhaps don't have the money to get them through this period. I really worry about them, how they're coping. And I said, well, they're not. We have 2 food banks in Guildford. We have community pantries. We have people who are struggling to put food on their table. And his reaction was, I can't vote Conservative anymore. They've beggared the poor. And this was a guy who had voted Conservative all his life. He kind of talked about it as if it was part of his identity, was being a Conservative. And to hear that from him kind of really solidified the thoughts I was already having, the observation I was already making that people were changing and that COVID had changed something.
I mean, you talked there about the Conservatives, but is there a particular party where you think that sentiment about why they're going to public service is particularly prevalent?
So, I mean, I can only talk about Surrey and Guildford. And typically in Guildford and Surrey, it is very Lib Dem or Conservative. And I'm not going to be drawn too heavily on this, but certainly the people where I have kind of had questions, and maybe if I sat down with them and had a conversation with them and heard what drew them into politics, I'd feel differently about them. But my observations from the outside would have been that perhaps they weren't in it for the reasons that I feel are the right reasons. And they were typically Conservatives. Guildford
itself is a diverse sort of urban / Surrey countryside constituency. Fairly wealthy.
Yeah.
But with pockets of socioeconomic deprivation. Yeah. And there's always been a bit of a battleground between the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats.
Yes.
You said in an interview that you live by lists.
Yes.
Explain your list strategy for me. A4 sheet?
I have an A5 dot notebook, which...
Nice.
And I just have...
Leather bound or just hardbound?
They're actually Leuchtturm ones. They're the German brand.
Say that again.
Leuchtturm. Anybody who does notebooks and is like ultra keen will know what I mean. But it's basically a dot notebook. A5. And for me, there's always a daily list.
Okay.
And I will kind of at the end of the day write the next day's list. But then over the years, we've kind of moved between different digital platforms to have what I would describe as the kind of the master list of ideas and stuff which I then draw down from.
Do you always carry your notebook with you?
Yes.
Always?
Always.
It's an important part of your, like your parliamentary pass, it's always on you.
And if by some weird twist of fate I don't have it with me, I'll always have my phone. So there's always I'll WhatsApp myself to say, don't forget this.
Colour-coded?
No.
No, not colour-coded. Surprising. I thought we'd go to the colour-coded levels just from the very niche notebook. I was like, okay, this is serious. But so you've got a master plan somewhere on a phone.
Yeah.
Which sets out what's it got on there?
So
long-term plans, is it?
It kind of has the key areas that I'm working on and that my team is working on, and that helps us to know that are we always chipping away at getting closer and closer to the ultimate thing we're trying to deliver.
You stood 3 times, as we mentioned. Guildford all the times, 2017, 2019, and again 2022,
yes.
Where you're here. What was the sort of most challenging part of the campaign, either this campaign or one of the ones that you've fought since 2017?
It's just the relentlessness of it, and you try and have a day off, but the reality is that the day off never happens. You know, you have your good intentions, but then you really need to speak to someone about this really urgent thing, or you think, oh well, I'll just do some reading and some prep, and you're always on the go. You're not eating, let's say, the best food.
What was your go-to food? What's your go-to campaign food?
So when I'm in my office, or the Lib Dem local party office, my go-to is the sandwich shop next door, which does a great burger with bacon and cheese. I was eating burgers.
Bacon and cheese burgers, okay.
Absolutely. And I would occasionally pick up salads on the run. But it was just the relentlessness and being so tired and just having been at it for not just the 6 weeks of the campaign, but also I'd been working on it almost full time since the start of the year. I'd taken a sabbatical from work, and it was just constant. And I love what I do and I love meeting people, but it just becomes really quite tiring. And you know that you haven't got the opportunity really to sleep. And you can tell yourself, oh, after the results come out, I'll sleep. But of course, the results came out and we'd won. And so there was some sleep, but it was perhaps not as much sleep as I'd have liked.
I mean, as you mentioned there, what toll does campaigning, does the grind of, I mean, even now, politics take on you? There are people who do say politics is still a very toxic place to be. Do you agree with that? Do you agree politics can be really toxic? You are also a woman in politics, yep. And there is a lot that's been said about how challenging that can be. And a very different experience to men who are involved in campaigning.
So I feel really fortunate that actually my overwhelming experience, not just in this election, but over my entire time, has been positive. And even when I'm at my tiredest, I've got a fabulous team around me, and then I've got friends and family who just keep me going and just kind of remind me why I'm doing it. So there's never been that low point other than just wanting more of a rest. But I am very aware of what it can start to be like online. I mean, as I said, I've been very fortunate. I've never had the extreme stuff. I've got colleagues who, at every level, not just MPs, but at council level as well, who've had death threats. And yes, you're putting yourself out there and standing up for what you believe in, but that abuse should never be acceptable. And it's not just that sort of level of abusive stuff. It's just the constant snipey or undermining comments on things like X, particularly, where you'll have talked about something you might have done that week, and they'll go, "Oh, well, have you done anything else that week?" Well, clearly I have. My entire reason for being an MP is serving my community, but I can't possibly tell you everything I do every single second of the day. And that can be frustrating and wearing. And if you're feeling tired and you're feeling a little bit low, to see that comment can be quite difficult. It's why so many of us actually don't end up looking at our we put the stuff broadcast on X and other social media platforms, but we then don't look at the comments, because there can be lovely comments, and I've had some wonderful comments over the years and recently as well, but there can also be those ones where you just think, did you really need to put that? Did you really need to say that?
I mean, you mentioned there, the most serious, there are death threats, but at least there's a lot of your colleagues. When you say colleagues, do you say female colleagues, or is this across?
My experience has been mainly female colleagues, but I am aware that male colleagues have had it too. Typically, it's my colleagues who are gay or are not white have been the ones who have had, if they're male, the main comments.
Is it almost, in a weird way, normal? It's normalised to the extent that everyone's getting it, or is it that widespread? Do you think?
I hate to use the word normal because it's not normal. It shouldn't happen. But certainly from over the years, as I've spoken to people at all levels of political activism, we've kind of come to a place of accept again isn't the right word, but we know it's going to happen. It doesn't make that right. And you have to, I've had to kind of go, okay, well, for me, I know at some point there's going to be unpleasantness, but I believe in what I'm doing, and I have people around me who I can turn to and who can support me when those situations come, and I will not let them win, and everybody has to make that decision for themselves. And I don't mean that if you don't stand because you're concerned, that says anything about you. We all have to make that choice for ourselves. Ultimately, for me, I just want it to stop, because we're losing people who'd be brilliant councillors, MPs, because they say, I'm not prepared to accept that. And again, there's not a right word here, because no one should have to accept that kind of abuse and negativity.
You said in 2022 that the winning tactic for the Lib Dems in Guildford is going to be the soft Conservative voters. Did that prove to be right?
Yes, absolutely.
Was there a driving issue you think was the main conversion point?
So I think it's worth saying before I answer that question that we also focused on people who perhaps would normally feel that they lean Green Party or Labour, and that was about asking them to lend us their vote and kind of coming together to defeat the Conservatives.
Which people might have heard as tactical voting.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are plenty of people across my constituency who voted for me because they knew that I was the person best placed to beat the Conservatives. But then there were lots and lots of what politicians describe as soft Conservatives who I wanted to make sure that they knew who I was, that they felt that I got what they were going through and could make a difference on those issues. And particularly we focused on the sewage that is flowing into the River Wey as a result of bad infrastructure or the lack of infrastructure development investment over the years. And that's not a problem unique to Guildford or Surrey.
It was a big Lib Dem
it's a big
campaign
thing.
point, as Ed Davey did on his, was it paddleboards?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. But it really, really matters to local people. One of the things that struck me since I first started standing in 2017 was the real shift of how strongly people feel about the environment. And we were effectively talking about the environment generally, but particularly focusing on the environment through the lens of what's flowing into our rivers and the damage that it's doing. So we focused a lot on that. We also focused a lot on access to GP appointments and access to dentists. Again, not a problem unique to Guildford, but it was one that everybody experiences. Everyone has that frustration of ringing up at 8 o'clock in the morning and not able to get an appointment with their GP. And just that sense that everything was broken. And lots of Conservatives I spoke to who then ended up voting for me were saying to me, look, I've voted Conservative all my life. They're supposed to be the ones who understand finance. They're supposed to be the ones that are good for business. They're supposed to be all of these things. And yet everything's broken.
Let's talk about your constituency results announcement. There you are standing around the count. What was it like waiting that time?
We were fairly sure pretty early on that we'd won. When we ultimately had a majority of 8,000. And so when you've got that kind of majority coming your way, it becomes clear quite early on. But the announcement was much later than we had anticipated. So we'd anticipated 4 a.m. I'd rocked up at about 12:30 after just having some food, taking a breather.
Any sleep? No sleep?
No sleep.
No sleep.
No sleep. So just kind of pacing, listening to the results coming in, realising that Al's won, Will's won, all these colleagues and friends who I was picking up across the country who were winning their seats and going, well, if they've won, surely it's going to happen here. And so, but you still don't believe it fully until you go to the table to be told by the returning officer, this is the result. Do you all agree? And then you stand up on that platform and the announcement happens.
So you know before you go up on stage that you've won?
Yeah, there's a legal check that has to happen where the returning officer, that's the person in charge for the council, basically has to check that all the parties agree that
That's quite interesting, you see, because I think many people, when they hear it being announced by the returning officer on the stage, they're looking at the faces of the people behind going,
so the people who know are the candidate and their agent, and obviously the returning officer for each of the parties. And you're not allowed to share that information. And then you walk up onto the stage, and then that is shared with everybody who's there.
The rest of the world.
Yeah.
Describe the 12 hours immediately after your name being called out. What was it? Was it a go home and just face plant the bed?
So we had a small gathering of people waiting for me. They'd been watching the results come in at our office in Guildford, and so I went there, and there was much cheering, a few drinks, general excitement about.
What time was this?
6 o'clock in the morning.
6 a.m. drinks. Yes. Respect.
On
no sleep as well.
And no sleep.
You've been seeing about 6 people.
Since about 11. A few drinks, headed home, I think I managed 3 hours sleep. And then I got up and went back to the office and did a few bits and bobs of admin that we knew we had to do straight away. And then I did a TV interview mid to late afternoon with BBC London.
Do you remember much of that? Or is it just a blur?
It's a bit of a blur.
When do you think you got your proper bit of shut-eye sleep after being elected? Because I imagine you're still buzzing for quite a long time.
And that's part of the problem is I'm not convinced that my 3 hours are particularly great sleep because your brain's just buzzing about the fact that this thing you've been working towards personally for so long has been achieved. The thing that you politically have been working towards because you do it because you want to make a positive difference has suddenly come to reality, and you're going to be able to try and do that. yeah, and you're just buzzing. And then, of course, my phone.
It's
Oh,
just
my
pinging,
goodness, my
yeah.
phone. I had turned off notifications, but I'd like go in and find I had 100 WhatsApp messages, 50 text messages, and I didn't even bother looking at my email.
How many of them are from great friends, people who wish you well, and how many are friends you never knew you had?
So there's a healthy selection of people who you've obviously been working with to make it happen, and then friends and family. But then, and this was a really extra and nice bit, which I wasn't anticipating, was people I hadn't spoken to for 5-10 years, who maybe I met at the NCT class with my oldest when I was pregnant with my oldest, because I've had the same
NCT class being
NCT, National Childbirthing Trust. So basically, the kind of the
just for everyone at home.
Yes, sorry, all those acronyms, and and they were messaging me and just going, "Oh my goodness, Zoe, you're an MP! Like, congratulations!" Or Zoe, I voted for you, and that I was really touched by that. And I had friends across the other side of the world as well on on LinkedIn would send me a message and go, "Oh, I was watching the results coming. Oh my goodness, Zoe, you're an MP."
How have you found the transition from having worked so, intensely locally, whether that be within politics or within other kind of community-based organisations, to now, as you said, not being able to actually do anything locally in terms of that's not your job anymore, but actually looking at it, in framing it and applying it in the national picture. Have you found that an easy transition?
It's been strange, and I'm still kind of getting used to the slight shift. So when Parliament's sitting, we're up in Westminster Monday to Thursday. It's possible that in the autumn it's actually going to be Monday to Friday. We're still waiting to hear. And that does mean that I'm not in constituency in Guildford as much as I've been used to. I'm not able to get out and about as much as I would have be used to. So it's making sure that when I am able to be in the constituency, I can build in the visits, that I can go door knocking, that I can make sure that I'm really as accessible as I can be in those periods of time where I'm able to be in the constituency. And then when I'm in London, just really making sure that I'm always going back to, why am I here? I'm here to serve the residents of Guildford and our villages. So, these are the things that we're working towards, and always looking at it through that lens. And one of the things that I've got up in the office, one of the things I will have in the office is a constituency map, but the kind of thing I've just waiting to get put on the wall is this picture of Guildford Cathedral, which just for me is that continual reminder to me and the team that Guildford is always in this office. Guildford is the focus. Guildford and the whole Guildford constituency is why we're here.
Very nice. Is it a big picture? Are we talking like?
It's probably about A3.
A3? Okay, pretty substantial. What is the weirdest, most surprising thing you found about being an MP or Westminster Parliament as a place to be?
I find all the protocols quite strange. There's all the processes which are very useful and important for kind of getting stuff done, but there's often some theatrics that go with it.
What's the most bizarre one that you've stumbled on? Be like, why?
Well, one that people will probably be aware of is when the Speaker is elected. So Sir Lindsay Hoyle was re-elected unanimously, and I say this because I think it's important. He's been re-elected unanimously, and there's still the theatrics of dragging him off the green benches.
It's kind of like a very half. It's like it's not a particular drag. It's more kind of leading by like the cufflinks or whatever it is.
And so those bits of theatrics and tradition that are there alongside the protocols, getting used to those is really interesting and slightly bizarre.
Should they stay?
I think some of them should. I think there's a balance, but I don't know which one. There's so many apparently that I haven't experienced yet, and it's trying to work out for me. I think there's a healthy balance to be had between respecting the long traditions of our parliament, which I think is brilliant that we've had democracy and a parliament for hundreds and hundreds of years, but also bringing it into a world where you can think of things like proper electronic voting, but also making it much more accessible, but where people look at it on the telly and just think, if you're not in politics, you probably look at the telly, the green bench, and just go, oh my goodness, that's a bit mad. And actually, I'd really love it if more people felt that that's an environment where they think, that's something I could do.
What would be your first cutting point then? What would be on the cutting block first for Zoe?
So I find it quite difficult the way that the Commons is designed to be very adversarial. Collaboration is often the way to get good long-term decision-making, and recognising that there aren't just two sides to the House of Commons, that actually the Lib Dems are a third of the opposition now, and actually no one party has the monopoly on good ideas. And so I wonder whether trying to find ways to make it more collaborative. But the adversarial nature is it's very loud in the chamber. And
would you refurbish and redesign the Commons? Is that?
I don't know. I think it's such early days where I'm aware that what I'm describing is partly it's completely new to me, but partly it's that observation that, and many of us watch the Commons on the telly and we kind of go, that's quite confrontational. Is there a way to make it less confrontational? Does that have to be done through redesign? I don't know, because obviously the Parliament building is so iconic and I think so important to what the UK Parliament is all about. But at the same time, can we find a way to recognise that collaborative politics often gets better decisions and better long-term decisions? We shall see. I think there's some great opportunities over the next Parliament to see that change happen.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Favourite film?
10 Things I Hate About You.
Oh, nice film. Dogs or cats or pet fish?
Probably cats.
Oh, interesting. Not a dog person or just...
I'm just not really a pet person.
No pets?
No pets.
Ever had any pets or...
When I was small, we had a cat and a dog.
But not since?
Not since.
Embarrassing crush you had when you were a teenager?
Oh. Gareth Gates. Although that's not quite teenager, that's like late
Gareth
teens.
Gates, that is niche. Okay. I did not expect, I don't think I ever expected anyone to Gareth Gates. No hate on Gareth Gates, it's just it's an unusual pick. The one food you'd pick if you were marooned on a desert island?
Steak.
How is your steak done?
Medium rare.
Medium rare?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. The MP you'd most like to be marooned on a desert island with?
So Jess Phillips, I think she's really inspiring. She's someone who on my journey politically has inspired me, because I feel like she is just herself. And I'd love to kind of get to know her and have some conversations about different topics.
You said hi yet?
I haven't had an opportunity to, yet.
One day. Scone or scone?
Scone.
What football team do you support, if you do?
I don't really do football, but Guildford City, my kids' team, is or former team.
How many detentions did you get when at school?
I think I probably had one.
Just one?
Yeah.
Were you
class detentions? They were where it all fell over.
So you were a good pupil.
Was, yeah.
Favorite karaoke song?
Oh, the one I did at conference once was Teenage Dirtbag.
Did you do it well?
Yes.
Were you asked for an encore?
It was definitely a rousing performance. Everyone joined in, so I think that's a good sign.
Well, you're a professional singer as well, so there's a lot of expectation, I feel, on you.
Yeah.
What would you find you doing on a sunny Sunday afternoon?
I'd probably be cooking. I love to cook.
Oh, really? What kind of stuff do you like to cook?
So there's the very practical cooking for a family, but I really like to experiment with vegetarian dishes, and I love to bake as well.
What kind of stuff do you bake?
So I quite like tray bakes. So I guess the traditionalists would say that's not proper baking. That's mixing things together and put it in the fridge. But recently did an Oreo caramel tray bake. Oh my goodness, it was good.
My goodness, all types of tray bakers are welcome here on this program, on this podcast. What's the naughtiest thing you've ever done?
So I went to university in Guildford, and there is a globe-shaped sculpture. And I feel like I'm a confession here. And a group of friends and I hooked up a harness to the inside of this sculpture, and we're kind of swinging around on the inside of the sculpture.
Very nice. Swinging around the world.
Yeah.
My goodness. And is the sculpture still there?
Yes.
Do you ever occasionally walk past and look at it and go?
Yeah, so I do.
Yeah. Early riser or night owl?
Early riser.
And finally, newspaper of choice?
Typically The Guardian.
Is there anything in terms of experiences, sets of beliefs or whatever that is, that you use to help guide where you go in politics?
So I'm a Christian, and part of that is, I think that's where some of the the social justice comes through, and that recognition that we are all equal, that we all deserve respect. And yes, that's kind of my plumb line, my balance of looking at it from that perspective.
How would you describe your political convictions?
What drives me day to day is fairness, equality, and I mean that in both equality of opportunity, but also we are all created equal, we are all human, and we all deserve to be treated well and with respect. The world has lots of inbuilt inequalities, and actually how do we start to address this? So for a young person who grows up on a council estate, how do we make sure that they have access to great education that allows them to pursue their dreams and aspirations, whatever that dream and aspiration looks like? I've been a school governor, I was a governor at a children's centre as well, and if you can give children right from the earliest age access to great, well-funded education that has the ability to support them to reach their aspirations, but then that also has a knock-on impact upon, I think fewer families potentially going on to live in poverty. It can break the cycle of generational inequality.
So a lot of it starts with education then as the key. How much do you think you should compromise what you believe in or your ideology in order to achieve power and to be able to make changes, or at least work towards changes that you want to see happen?
So I fundamentally work on the basis that my values are unchanging, and I'm always looking at, but if I'm looking to work with colleagues, do they share a similar set of core values around that sense of equality and fairness and internationalism and those kind of core values? The policy, I'm more willing to find compromise. I'm not going to go to a table and end up walking away with nothing of our policy, but I am prepared a lot more personally to sit down and talk it through and find a way. Look, can we combine these two? Is there a way to make it work so that actually we know this is going to work really well on this topic, and we can see that actually yours, yes, bit of yours can come together, put them together, that's going to be a great outcome. And I've seen how at council levels that compromise can work really well.
On a national level, though, I mean, particularly with the Lib Dems, there becomes a point where compromise can undermine the values that you have.
Yep.
And for the Lib Dems, the most obvious ones would be coalition government and the continual criticism about the student loans, but also many in terms of the austerity package that was rolled out. People would see that as compromising on the values of what the politicians of the time stood for. How do you view that period then?
So I have mixed feelings. I think there are bits of it that I'm really proud of. So particularly I think of equal marriage. That wouldn't have happened without the Lib Dems, and that has changed thousands and thousands of people's lives for the better and made our nation have better equality when it comes to marriage. There are elements where I find it a bit more challenging, and touching on student loans. Now, I was the first cohort back when Labour brought in student loans to have those. And so when there were a much smaller group of Lib Dems again versus a quite significant sized Conservative Party, granted they didn't have a majority and they needed us, they made decisions that if I could go and turn back the clock, I probably would.
Student loans would be the main one?
So student loans would still exist because remember they were brought in by Labour.
Yeah, but as in the hike up.
But it's the way the interest works and those aspects that I'm a parent. I know the impact that's going to have on my sons, and I see the impact it has on students today. And yes, they do pay it back when they get to a certain point, but I struggle with the fact that the interest is accumulating at a rate that it never did when my peers were going through that, and the fact that now it's extra loans if you're in hardship, not a grant. And actually, those grants, I want to see it go back to if you're struggling, you're in a hardship, and you go to get support, you have a grant, not more, applied onto your loan. Because if you're a lower income student struggling, and you're then going to get even more put onto your loan. That, I think, is wrong.
Will you always be following, do you anticipate to always be following the party whip and be a loyal MP?
I will always put Guildford and my residents first. I think the one thing I always go back to is it's great that we as Lib Dems, we stood on a great manifesto with great policy that when I look at it, I'm like, there is nothing here that if I was looking at that and was thinking about how I would then vote when I was looking at government legislation and things like that, because obviously you're going to look at what's our position on this. I'm entirely comfortable with the Lib Dem position actually generally goes really well with what's going to be best for my residents. But I will always go back to my residents. I'm there for them.
There isn't anything that concerns you or any issues or red lines?
No, and I have looked at this because it's often one you get asked in hustings in your constituency. And so far, I have not found an issue where, in terms of Lib Dem direction on something, I'm going, this doesn't sit well with me, or this isn't going to work for my residents. For me, but if I ever get to that point, my first port of call is a conversation with my colleagues, because actually there will be times when some of us maybe abstain, when the others vote against or vote for. And that's what I love about being a Lib Dem. We are able to have those conversations about difficult topics and find a way through without tearing each other apart.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see in the next Parliament with 70 of you and a chief whip to keep you all in line as to what the outcome of that will be. The final question. What would be the one thing that you would like to achieve or have achieved that you can point at and say, I contributed or I was involved in that? What would it be?
Asking for one is really hard.
On your master sheet, what is number one?
So it comes back to the fairness stuff.
Okay.
And the most obvious one for me actually right now is actually the 2-child limit.
Okay.
Because for me, being able to get families out of poverty is really important, because again, it goes back to, it almost links in with the educational thing. If you can raise a generation out of poverty, they probably won't go back there. And that's, no one should be living in poverty in 2024. And the most pressing thing right now in this Parliament is that cap, because it has a direct impact on whether or not many families are living in poverty. So that's the short-term answer. There are then obviously other things, but that's the very short-term thing. If I could see that go and start seeing families in my constituency no longer being in poverty, no longer having to rely on food banks, no longer struggling to pay their energy bills, that for me would be
because the
win.
2-child limit has been lifted.
Yeah.
Zoe Franklin, thank you very much for coming on MeetTheMPs.